Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasodanandana Bhajajana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Bhajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Shriman's Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. ISKCON Vibhuti Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnupad, Paramahansa Padavajikacharya, Sotadas of the Shriman's Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Ananta Gauri Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Namacharya, Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gogopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Gopadan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadip Mayapur Dham ki jai. Ganga Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulasi Devi Maharani ki jai. Samabhakta Vedavinda ki jai. Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Brihat Mridanga ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 26, Text 29. Taijasāt vikurvāṇād. Taijasāt vikurvāṇād. Buddhi-tattvam abhūt sati. Buddhi-tattvam abhūt sati. Dravya-sphuraṇa-vijñānam. Dravya-sphuraṇa-vijñānam. Indriyāṇām anugrahaḥ. Indriyāṇām anugrahaḥ. Taijasāt vikurvāṇād. Buddhi-tattvam abhūt sati. Dravya-sphuraṇa-vijñānam. Indriyāṇām anugrahaḥ. Yep. Others? Maharaj, you want to chant it? Yeah, hang on. Buddhi-tattvam abhūt sati. Dravya-sphuraṇa-vijñānam. Indriyāṇām anugrahaḥ. Taijasāt vikurvāṇāt. Vaishnavis. Taijasāt, from the false ego and passion, to then, vikurvāṇāt, undergoing transformation, buddhi, intelligence, sattvam, principle, abhūt, took birth, sati, O virtuous lady, dravya, objects, _sphuraṇa, coming into view, vijñānam, ascertaining, indriyāṇām, to the senses, anugrahaḥ, giving assistance. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. By transformation of the false ego and passion, intelligence takes birth, O virtuous lady. The functions of intelligence are to help in ascertaining the nature of objects when they come into view, and to help the senses. Purport. Intelligence is the discriminating power to understand an object and helps the senses make choices. Therefore, intelligence is supposed to be the master of the senses. The perfection of intelligence is attained when one becomes fixed in the activities of Kṛṣṇa consciousness. By the proper use of intelligence, one's consciousness is expanded, and the ultimate expansion of consciousness is Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Om Aganat Timiram Dasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unyo Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakaramayam Didati Swapadantikam. So from the translation, it almost sounds like the intelligence is something that's meant to help in the process of sense gratification, in the sense that it's born from false ego and passion. And Prabhupada says, the translation says, and it helps the senses. But of course, in the purport, Prabhupada deals with the understanding in a completely different way, that the intelligence is meant to help one come to the, Prabhupada says here, therefore intelligence is supposed to be the master of the senses, and the perfection of intelligence is attained when one becomes fixed in activities of Kṛṣṇa consciousness. The proper use of intelligence, one's consciousness is expanded. By the proper use of intelligence, one's consciousness is expanded, and the ultimate expansion of consciousness is Kṛṣṇa consciousness. So the intelligence is meant to direct the mind and the senses and help us come to the platform of Kṛṣṇa consciousness. And being Kṛṣṇa conscious, what does it mean to be Kṛṣṇa conscious? It means to become something like Srila Prabhupada. He's an example of a perfect Kṛṣṇa conscious person, Srila Prabhupada. There's so many wonderful things that could be said about Srila Prabhupada, in describing how he was a perfect Kṛṣṇa conscious person. I would like to just share my one personal appreciation, the thing that I appreciated most about Srila Prabhupada. And in order to do that, I'll give a little information about, my background. So before coming to Kṛṣṇa consciousness, I had a younger brother who was about 3-4 years younger than me. And when he was about 13 years old, he was diagnosed with leukemia, which at that time is cancer of the blood. And it was, at that time, not much was known about that disease, how to, deal with it. So after being diagnosed with leukemia for about a year, they were trying to treat him. My parents had to sign consent forms, for all these different experimental drugs that they, thinking, well, maybe this might help, maybe that might help. They didn't know, they just, so, okay, so any hope's better than none. So, but he suffered. a lot, as a result, because he did these experimental drugs, he looked different, he lost his hair, all sorts of things, and he was suffering as a result of that. And finally, after about a year, he passed away. So when he passed away, I wasn't a very philosophical person, but I just started thinking to myself, well, because I'm from a Jewish background, and we weren't Orthodox or anything like that, but I did go to Hebrew school, I did get bar mitzvah, I did basically sort of believe that, okay, there's God. But after that happened, I started thinking to myself, wait a second, how could there be a God that's all-powerful, all-knowing, and benevolent? And this kind of thing could happen to my brother, who's just like, when it happened, he's just 13 years old. He didn't even have a chance to do anything wrong. How could that happen? How could a God that's all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-benevolent allow something like that to happen to my brother? Now, I could have been thinking like that much earlier, but because, as I said, I wasn't particularly a philosophical person, but this personal thing in my life kind of was a catalyst. And then I just obviously started thinking of other examples, even more powerful examples. What about people who are born poor, no opportunity for education, disabled in some way, even, where's the fairness? Where's the justice there? There's an expression, born behind the 8-ball. There's a game in pool, it's called 8-ball, and the idea is if there's a cue ball and you're trying to get these other balls into the pockets, anyway, if you hit the 8-ball, either you just even hit it or you hit it, it goes into the pocket, you automatically lose. I can't remember which it is. But it's obvious that certain people are kind of, as far as material things go, are born behind the 8-ball. They're just born in a really disadvantageous position. So, I started thinking, considering all that too, and I just came to the conclusion, no. It just seems ridiculous. It doesn't seem like there's any possibility that there could be a supreme being or a God that's all-powerful, all-knowing, and most prominently, all-benevolent. That was the big one. That was the big stumbling block, the all-benevolent part of it. And these, the kind of things that are going on that we see going on and even experience going on. So I went on like that for a while, thinking like that, and it didn't help. It wasn't something that helped me in my life. And on top of that, I wasn't like a pious person. So, but then I came in contact, fortunately, with Prabhupada's books, and then eventually with the movement. And it kind of saved my life, because I felt like really I was capable of doing anything to myself or anybody else. I was, kind of that crazy at that point. So I came in contact with Prabhupada's books, and I found an explanation. I got an explanation for how there could be a God that's all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-benevolent. And it's very simple, karma, reincarnation. It wasn't something, that made me like happy to hear that, okay, my brother was, or people in general, people are sinful in a past life, and they're suffering reactions in this lifetime. We're in a multiple life process. I'd never considered that previously. I heard the words karma, reincarnation, but that was it. I just heard the words. I didn't, understand, the philosophy. But that made sense to me. It gave me an explanation that I could, hang my hat on. Whereas the idea that it's just one life, just didn't make any sense at all, especially after what I, experienced and then what I thought about. So, that was there. Prabhupada, that's my biggest appreciation of Srila Prabhupada, that I feel he gave me knowledge that enabled me at that point, and still to this day does, understand what the heck's going on here, what life's all about, and what we're supposed to do with life. And it's not something he concocted himself, and it's not something new. Somebody might wonder why, everybody should wonder, how is it possible that people just think that it's one life? You just get one, and people do think like that. Even educated people think like that. People in high positions think like that. I remember when my father passed away, I went with my mother, because anyway, his funeral was done by the the Jewish people, you know. So we had to go see the rabbi, and we're talking about the details and everything like that, what was going to happen. And at one point I asked him, I said, so is there a sense in which, in the Jewish religion, is there a sense in which, you know, people live on? And he said, you live on in the memory of others. Of course, there's others, you know, there's Reform, Orthodox, Conservative, so this was Reform, but that was his idea. You know, there's no sense in which that individual lives on. You live on, that person lives on in the memory of others, that's it. And those, basically when you're dead, okay? So this is a rabbi. You know, this was somebody who was kind of like, you know, he graduated college, university, had a master's or at least a PhD in theology, et cetera, et cetera. And that was, you know, that was their understanding. So that didn't work for me. It didn't work then. It didn't work 30, 40 years before that. But as I said, so Prabhupada's presented something that was not his concoction. It's not something new. Actually, I'll read you something interesting. I read this in a previous class, but I'd like to read it again because it's relevant and I find it fascinating. 2,500 years ago, there was a man named Plato, who I mentioned, as I said in the previous class. And this is 500 years before the Christian religion even began. By the way, there was religion before, you know, Christianity, a lot more than even, you know, when it started. Anyway, this is what Plato thought. This is from, I found this in some Christian journal or something like that. But anyway, it says, Plato saw himself as a spiritual man and had many ideas on religion and theology. First and foremost, Plato believed in reincarnation. He taught that human souls had previously existed in a perfect world and there enjoyed the presence of God. That sound familiar at all to anybody? Does that sound a little bit familiar? Yeah. Okay, then it goes on to say, somehow these souls committed some sin and fell from God's presence and were placed into physical bodies on earth as a punishment. The purpose of life is to correct the soul's initial mistake and return to God. So when I read that, I thought, whoa, that's far out. That sounds exactly like, you know, well, it is. It doesn't just sound like, it is. That's our philosophy, the same thing. And I was thinking, wow, it's really interesting that, you know, somebody that 2,500 years ago were thinking like that. But the idea is that actually the further, my understanding is the further you go back in time, the more you're going to find people were thinking like that. It's not like, you know, we tend to think now, or at least people tend to think that the human society as a whole is gradually progressing in its knowledge, and we're moving up, you know, to the point of like enlightenment of some sort, okay, higher knowledge. But actually, according to the Vedic perspective, the Vedic way of looking at things, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. From the beginning of the Satya Yuga onwards, it's downhill. Things, you know, things are degrading. You know, people are getting more and more covered over. And I have Shastra evidence to support that. In the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Kṛṣṇa says, Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo vidu sakaleneha mahata yoga nashta parantapa. It means that, you know, Krishna's explaining to Arjuna that originally I instructed this imperishable science of yoga. By the way, Prabhupada defines yoga as the science of the knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme. Okay? So Krishna says to Arjuna, in the beginning I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivaswan, who in turn instructed it to Manu, who's the father of mankind, and he instructed it to his son Ikshvaku. But in the course of time, this science, as it is, appeared to be broken, or the cyclic succession appeared to be broken, and the science as it is appears to be lost. And the words are yoga nashta. Yoga meaning one's knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme, and nashta means, Prabhupada translated as scattered. So that's what happens. That's what happens. As the time goes on, the knowledge gets scattered. It gets scattered, you know. So people understood Krishna conscious philosophy. The further you go back in time, the more you have, you know, an understanding of Krishna conscious philosophy, the more prominent and prevalent it is. But, you know, it's kind of, it's not like linear. It's not like it's just like, it's, if, like the stock market is always going up and down, okay, if you graph it. But there's something called plotting the slope of a line, which means that it's like the slope is the average behavior of that pattern of activity. So, for instance, if the stock market starts here and ends there, but in the meantime it's going like that, when you plot the slope, it just looks like that. See? So that's what's going on. The slope of the line is that things are going downhill, but it's not necessarily that it goes just like that. It just might be behaving, from day to day like that. So there are other developments, and like, for instance, one interesting development that's, science, for instance. Science, and there are people who are doing science and coming to the conclusion that, everything's just the result of an undirected process. It's all random, it's all chance, we're just here. There's no real, things just, we came out of nothing and things have got to where they are because there's an illusion of design, but really, ultimately, there's some scientists who think like that, but there's other scientists who don't think like that, and they're just as prominent. And I'll give you an example of one scientist, a very famous scientist, who, as a result of his research, came to an entirely different conclusion. You might have heard the name of Hoyle, Frederick Hoyle. He's a very famous physicist, and he started off his career thinking, and he made this statement in the beginning of his career, religion is but a desperate attempt to find an escape from the truly dreadful situation in which we find ourselves. That's what he said as a young physicist. Okay. But then after doing a lot of research, he did research into the DNA, how digital code is stored in the DNA molecule, he came to the conclusion, as a result of his research, scientific research, that this was a statement he made right towards the end of his life. He said, a common sense interpretation of the data suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology. So who was that super intellect? Basically, he became a theist. And there are other examples like that of scientists who, did an about face. They started off kind of with an atheistic sort of a attitude, but as a result of their research, they came to the conclusion that that doesn't work. It just doesn't, it doesn't support, the data doesn't support my attitude, and they changed it. I'll give you another couple examples. This is a statement by a famous physicist, Paul Davies. He says, experience shows that as we dig deeper and deeper using scientific methods, we continue to find rational and meaningful order. Let's see if we got another good one here, maybe. Well, I think you got the idea. But, so, the thing is this, that it's good that that's there, that there are at least some scientists that are kind of like, as a result of research that they're doing, are coming into the conclusion that the best explanation for what we're experiencing, where everything comes from, is their meaning and purpose. So, particularly where everything comes from, is that there's an intelligent, transcendent, active creator that provides the best explanation for both biological and cosmological origins, or in other words, in plain and simple language, where everything comes from. So that's there. But at the same time, that is it's a very slow process, and it's not guaranteed to, take any individual that's doing it to the ultimate goal of what Prabhupada is saying here, Kṛṣṇa consciousness. So, it's helpful, it has its value, but ultimately to get absolute truth, that is a different process. What I just was kind of talking about is, let's see, it's something called inference to the best explanation, okay? And the definition for that is a non-deductive reasoning method that involves selecting a hypothesis that best explains available evidence. It says IBE is a common method in scientific reasoning and can also be used in everyday life. For example, you might use IBE, it's inference to the best explanation, to infer that your dog chewed your pillow, or that there's a mouse in the house because you hear scratching and squeaking. But the thing is this, it doesn't give you a God's eye view. So to get that God's eye view, in other words, it's a different process. This is inductive, and our process is basically deductive. We accept knowledge from a higher authority. And exactly how that works is described in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, most famous verse, one of the most famous verses, about just try to learn the truth by approaching a bona fide spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. So that's how our process for arriving at knowledge, perfect knowledge of the absolute truth, that we have to just do that. You have to, that's just one of many verses, which basically what it's saying is you have to, it's describing the process for accessing the mercy of Kṛṣṇa via accessing the mercy of the pure devotee. That's what's essential. Ultimately, we have to access the mercy of Kṛṣṇa or the bona fide spiritual master in order to arrive at this, what's described here in this purport as the ultimate expansion of Kṛṣṇa consciousness, the ultimate expansion of consciousness is Kṛṣṇa consciousness. You got to get the mercy. And that mercy is available to, you can, as I said, these kind of processes like what the scientists are doing, they're helpful to a certain extent, but ultimately you got to plug into devotional service, and well, that's what we're recommended to do, to get, to access that mercy. But the active ingredient is actually the mercy itself. In other words, our plugging into devotional service is even it's not what causes it. You see, it's like it's a way in which we can demonstrate our sincerity by engaging in devotional service, where we're demonstrating our desire, our sincerity to Kṛṣṇa, and then Kṛṣṇa reciprocates. In just a couple of verses, well, in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Kṛṣṇa says, to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. Out of compassion, I who am dwelling within their heart, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. See, so unless Kṛṣṇa does that, it doesn't happen. You have to engage in devotional service in such a way that Kṛṣṇa becomes pleased, or the spiritual master becomes pleased, and then from his part, he destroys with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. In other words, it's not mechanical, it's a relationship. You got to please Kṛṣṇa, you got to please the spiritual master, and then something happens. Then what's described there, he destroys with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. There are there's cases, well, I mean, how would I lead into this? One incredible example of, the importance of getting the mercy of a great soul was given by Lord Chaitanya to, I believe it was Sanatana Goswami, in the course of his instruction to him. He related a story to him which originally appears in the Skanda Purana, and it's the story of Mugrari, the hunter. So how that story goes is this. We're all familiar. I'll just quickly kind of recapitulate it. So Narada Muni is coming back from Vaikuntha, and he happened to kind of land in Prayag, where they have the Kumbh Mela like that, confluence of the Ganges and the Yamuna like that. So anyway, so he's walking along the path there, and he's seeing all these half-killed animals. And he's wondering, whoa, what's going on here, So he's kind of following the trail of half-killed animals, because he's noticing they're all writhing in pain and, like, and who did this? Who's responsible for this? So he kind of wanders off the path, following the trail of the half-killed animals. And so, he's kind of making, noise, moving branches or this or that. And meantime, there's a hunter who is aware of, somebody's coming towards him, and he's thinking, who's this person interfering, spoiling my hunting? He's scaring all the animals away. I got to get him out of here. And he was he was upset, he was angry, And so Narada Muni's approaching, and they kind of, when he saw Narada Muni, when he got like in the presence of Narada Muni, Prabhupada explains his intention was to kind of, tell him off and use abusive language, etc., like that, but he couldn't do it. When he got in the presence of Narada Muni, he was influenced by this, Narada Muni's Shakti, bhakti, purity. And so he politely said, sir, you've come off the path. Is there something I could, is there something you need from me? Do you need some deer skin or some, some skin of some sort, or what do you need? He basically politely was saying, what do you want? Let me, I'll give it to you, but get going. You're interfering with my hunting. So Narada Muni said, no, I don't need anything like that, but I just have one question for you. And he says, okay, what's that? He said, why are you half killing the animals? Why don't you just kill them full? And he said, he explained, he said, I'm a hunter. My father was a hunter, and he taught me this, and I actually derive great pleasure by, seeing the animals like in pain like that until they die. So, actually the word Mugrari, his name, his very name, which I don't know if he was given by his father or by the people in the village, means enemy of the animals. Mrg is animal, and Arari means enemy. So that his name meant enemy of the animals. So Narada Muni, when he heard that, explained to him, said, what you're doing is it's not good. It's sinful. And the man, Prabhupada told this story about half a dozen times. On one occasion, he went, sin? Murari goes, sin? What's that? And so Narada Muni explained to him a bit about, the philosophy. And then, so the man was affected, and he said, oh my God, well, what do I do? How do I become free from this sin? And Narada Muni said, okay, first thing you have to, stop this profession. It's not a good profession, what you're doing, especially the way you're doing it. And the man objected, politely. He said, but how will I earn my livelihood? He said, don't worry, I'll take care of that. And so he instructed him to go back and, get rid of his possessions, sell them, give them away, whatever, and come with him. And Narada Muni took him and his wife to the bank of the Ganges. He either gave him a tulsi plant or he planted a tulsi plant, and he instructed him, stay here and just, worship the tulsi plant, take care of the tulsi plant, and chant Hare Kṛṣṇa. And then he said, okay, he had faith, He got the mercy of Narada Muni, because how is it that somebody who could be that sinful, he was not only was a hunter, but he was a hunter who was taking pleasure in half killing the animals, and he became totally transformed by the association of Narada Muni to the point where he turned his back on all that, and he was just going and chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa. Anyway, sure enough, Narada Muni left, and sure enough, by Narada Muni's arrangement, the people in the village kind of heard that, well, this hunter is he became a Vaishnava? How's this possible? So they were going, and, they were going with presentations of grains and fruits and this and that, and more than what him and his wife required. And him and his wife were actually wondering, how come they're sending so much more? How come, Guru are just sending so much more than we need? Anyway, so that was happening. Even if the story ended there, that would be pretty amazing, that somebody like that could become a devotee. But it goes further. So after some time, Narada Muni said to a friend of his, Parvata Muni, he said, hey, I have this disciple, he was a hunter, and I want to go check up on him. You want to come with me? He said, sure. So they go, and they're getting close to where he's living. They notice he's approaching, and he's kind of like, the game hopscotch? Maybe some of you are American and are a little older now. Anyway, it's a game you play. You're hopping, and if you do it, you got to hop in a funny way, So he was just approaching Narada Muni and Parvata Muni, but he was kind of jumping around, They couldn't make what's going on. Anyway, so when they got close to each other, they asked him, why were you moving like that as you're approaching us? He said, there was all these ants on the path, and I was trying to brush them away, or I didn't want to step on any of the ants. I didn't want to kill any of the ants. So they looked at each other like, wow, this is the power of devotional service. Of course, it was the power of the mercy of Narada Muni. But just that's the power of the pure devotee, that this man became completely transformed. He went from somebody who was half killing animals and enjoying it to somebody who was really reluctant to even killing an ant. So, it's hope. I like that story because I think to myself, well, maybe there's hope for even me. I never enjoyed half killing animals. Maybe if somebody that's sinful, by the mercy of a pure devotee, could become transformed like that, I mean, it seemed like anybody could. There's hope for all of us. So I'll stop there. Does anybody have any question? Archita Prabhu. Yeah.
Thank you for the nice question. Just part of the power of Narad Muni to convince Mrigari was that he showed him what would happen in the future. It wasn't just the philosophy that convinced him. When Narad Muni showed him that all the animals that you've killed are waiting to kill you, that shook him to the core. And that made him convinced that, yes, I should do what my Guru Maharaj is advising me to do. And that's what's missing from today's society. People don't believe in consequences anymore. They say, yeah, okay, I made a mistake, whatever. They don't understand that there are dire consequences that they're going to suffer in the future for all these mistakes or deliberate sinful activities that they're doing. Somebody who's killing daily thousands of soldiers for their own ego, they don't realize what they're going to go through. Somebody who kills a cow, they don't realize that for every hair on the body of the cow, you have to take birth 1,000 times and be killed. They don't know the consequences, and therefore they don't take it seriously. But Mrigari saw the consequences by Narad Muni's mystic power, so he fell in line.
This story about Mrigari the hunter, very rare. Sometimes we hear special cases in which there's no precedent for this person to get the mercy. So in regards to endeavor and mercy, sometimes which comes first? Sometimes it is said that God helps those who help themselves. And in this particular case, he probably, as he surrendered, and then he started getting better and better, and Narada Muni helped him. Yeah, so is mercy most required, or endeavor, or both at simultaneously? Which one comes first?
Well, in the case of Mrigari, it seems as if we're not given any information of a background story. Lord Chaitanya didn't say, actually this Mrigari in his past life was just a story. He starts off from the point of, here's this sinful hunter. But anyway, there's all sorts of Vedic injunctions that in the human form of life we're supposed to endeavor. So we're supposed to try to get the mercy. But so if that makes, God helps those who help themselves. So we're supposed to try to help ourselves. That's there. Don't wait to have happened to you what happened to Mrigari, that Narada Muni just happens to come and save you. No, we have to. The Vedic injunctions are there that when you come to the human form of life, atato brahma jigyasa, now is the time to inquire. You have to try to do something.
Sometimes it appears that many practitioners, they endeavor so much to get mercy, and it appears that they don't get the mercy. That they ended up frustrated, and they might give up the process.
They might not understand what the mercy is. They might be, thinking of in terms of something improvement material. But according to Prabhupada, nobody who tries engaging in devotional service is the loser. That Krishna's understanding what's going on. Krishna understands a person's sincere efforts, and he's making aware of that, and in due course of time, if that person's fortunate enough to persevere, keep trying, it'll all manifest. Everything will be there. Okay, thank you very much.